Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it is the 10th of November, 2022, Thursday as usual. Had better Thursdays. I'm sure most of you have too. This election was a real wake-up call in a lot of ways. Yeah, people are complaining. No super chats yet. No, I haven't had a chance to get them in place. But nevertheless, it's good to see everybody. I was in Nashville for 48 hours at the most, I guess. And had a great time, as always, on the Daily Wire live election coverage. That was really fun. And had also a lot of great conversations with the, obviously with Jeremy and the gang, but also with some of the guys that are doing the content that I do. So we've got, we will do the America's Forgotten Heroes things live, and it looks like that is going to be pretty cool. They want to open it up, kind of get me out of the studio, go to some of these places. That'd be fantastic if we can pull that off. And then I also talked briefly with the producer of the one I'm working on now, the Soviet terror state ones. And thank you very much for that. Bart's Treasure says I was a favorite guest on the DW broadcast. Yeah, it's just what I do, man. I just kind of hang around, have a little chat with Megan, see, just for giggles. Thank you, though. So the great news also is that Daily Wire has got one of those video volumes with LED walls, which are super high resolution. That's how they shot Mandalorian. So the wall lights the scene, and you can get all kinds of fantastic, unbelievable effects. So the good news with that is we can make the Soviet terror masters really moody. And my hope is to get a hold of the KGB archives. I think it's the largest photo collection in the world. If memory serves, the KGB has inherited from the NKVD and the OGPU and the Cheka and all the rest of it. I think it's like 9 million mugshots. I think it's 9 million. And I know there's a book, I think, that publishes a lot of them. So what I would like to have done, the biggest problem with this series that I'm working on now is trying to convey the magnitude and at the same time the humanity. It's like you can do one, you can do the other. You can connect it to people, but then you don't get a sense of the scale, or you can just talk about the scale and you'll get any sense of person about, you can't connect it to people's faces. So what my hope would be, and I don't want to promise anything because I just threw this out there with a couple of the producers, but hopefully when we shoot the Soviet Terror Masters thing, somewhere on the set, since they have an entire wall behind me, I think that somewhere on the set I would like to have just those pictures just like dissolve, 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 dissolve. Each one of those episodes is going to be probably 40, 45 minutes. There'll be 7 of those. And if we keep doing that, and the critical thing is we cannot repeat a single one, because if we repeat a single one, it'll look like a loop. I don't want it to be a loop. But in any event, I think it would be great behind the cheddar curtain. That's great. Thanks. Thank you, Andrew. So in any event, I think it's going to look really, 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 really good and really be kind of moody and dark, and it needs to have something to capture just the sheer horror of it. Hang on a second. Engineers will appreciate this. I'm not normal. It's a little closer to normal now. Thank you very much for the black sweatshirt. You probably have heard, if you've been watching the show, that we lost our air conditioning 2 months ago now. Still haven't gotten that fixed. However, that means we don't have any heat either, so it's gotten a little chilly by California standards here. Our friend, I won't mention his real name, but in the Twitch stream, DFRSS is about to have a baby. He's joined us from Lithuania. came to the United States, joined the Army. He's a great, great, great guy. I had book reservations to go to the wedding. Honest to God, I had the reservations made, and this would have been March 18th, something like that, of 2020. So, they shut down the whole thing. But in any event, I'm sorry I couldn't have been there for that, but congratulations. It's just wonderful news, and we're all just so proud of you. One big happy family here. So there's that. And then, I don't want to get in any trouble. I really don't. So when I say something is very speculative, that's thank you very much. P7 2017 says, if you were normal, sir, I wouldn't be here. That's good to know. Thank you. But anyway, congratulations. So here's the thing that I can. It's not even really a tease so much as it's a tease for a tease. Tease for a tease. I think let's just call it that. There is a high level of probability that when I finish this Soviet Terror Masters thing, we will do the videos of the America's Forgotten Heroes that we shot. We'll just use those same scripts. But the tease of the tease, the pre-alpha tease, that's perfect. It's not an alpha tease, it's a pre-alpha tease. I did not know that, Edward. If you can bring that back up again, that'd be great. So here's the pre-alpha tease, completely in-game captured footage. I think after I deliver these scripts, the next thing that I'll be working on in association with Daily Wire, it's not even run up the flagpole yet, but we certainly had discussions about it. And that is, I believe I'll be doing, oh my God, what happened to my hair? It's emergency. Anyway, I think there's a good chance that the next thing we'll be working on is a feature film about. I want to do feature films about most, if not all, of America's Forgotten Heroes, and the easiest one to do from a production point of view to start would be Frank Luke. So my hope is that when I get this thing out the door, I will crank out a script, a feature film script of the Frank Luke story, which I've already all of them I've already enormously researched, and the version that that finally aired as audio is still, it's probably a third or a quarter of what I wrote. Thank you for the kind words about this is called the wave. It's not really a wave. It's more of a Pacific wave. It's like a surfing wave. It's not like the classic Jack Lord wave. Our friend DFRSS, Father to Be Soon, said Bill's voice is perfect for documentaries. I always thought Bill had the worst possible voice for documentaries, but I will grant you that it's probably relatively unique. So feature film, no, not like a docudrama, like a film, a movie. It's no narrator, no history. No, it's a film. It's a film about Frank Luke, and it would be a dramatic interpretation, but it wouldn't be a documentary. My particular affectation for this would be to open. If we can do one, then we can probably do more. Frank Luke is probably the simplest one, and it's also got a lot of action in it. But the action is, World War I biplanes. Anything like that's relatively easy to do. You get live actors, obviously, and then you have a very minor set of sets to build. You got a couple of, like the squadron room hangar and stuff. In any event, it will be a feature film and tell his story, which is an amazing story. And then, after that, if that goes well, then, sky's the limit after that. I think John Paul Jones would make a great feature film. I think they all, without question, the Doolittle Raid would make a great feature film, And Tappy 3 is the ultimate goal for me. It's just that story's got to get told. And I'm just watching. I'm just watching. You know what? I'm going to actually. I had not thought about this, but I'm going to grab it. I have been watching, just looking for graphics on YouTube, right? Just whoever's doing graphics, and I found this guy, Japanese guy, and what he's doing it's unbelievable, and it just came out of nowhere, and he's putting one out like every 2 or 3 days. I'm going to get the one that really matters. So give me a second. I'm just going to keep talking while I'm doing this whole thing. You get the idea. But this is worth doing because it'll give you a really good idea of what one guy at home is able to do. Oh my God, I haven't seen this one yet. All right, so this will be cool. Everybody just stay calm here. Yeah. You guys are going to lose your minds when you see this. So this again is just a guy, as far as I know. It's just a regular guy in Japan, and he's got a thing about World War II naval vessels, and he's putting out the best computer graphics, certainly of that genre that I have ever seen. So hold on to your hats. I'll get 2 of them for you, but just this first one I have not seen. Okay, hang on. What am I doing? No. Okay, sorry for the delay, but it's be worth it. Believe me. Copy. Open. Doom. Come on, you son of a bee. I'm so excited about this. So this would be for the Tappy 3 thing, and it'd also be for the Doolittle thing. So just take a look at this. It's unbelievable. If I can just get it downloaded, we'll be in business. It's only 2 minutes. Come on. Yeah, there we go. It really is breathtaking. And I'd love to credit the guy. I'll put the link to his channel in the description, but virtually all of the characters are in Japanese. Japanese, like I'm turning Japanese. I think I'm turning Japanese. I really think so. Turning Japanese. Okay, feast your eyes on this, kids, because this is freaking amazing. And then I'll get the one. I might get 2 others actually, because he's got a bunch on Yamato, and he's actually got an escort carrier, Jeep carrier. All right, so hopefully, let's see if I can just drag and drop this. Sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't know it loops. Sorry about that. So anyway, that's that was the Hornet, early fleet carrier. Yeah, Boomer is right. Get me somebody, get some 11-year-old in here to run the board. But the one I'm about to show you is an escort carrier, which is the kind that they were defending in Taffy 3 here. I just turned the sound down because I didn't want the background sound to come in. But in any event, I'm going to leave it up this time. Here we go. This is the escort carrier. It's not. Sorry, grab the wrong file. Hang on a second. Here's the escort carrier. That's one of the 6 G carriers that the guys were escorting. And now I'll show you what this guy did. This is just a guy. He doesn't have a lot of views either. So you can go off. And this one I have a real soft spot in my heart for, because this is obviously Fletcher destroyer is the same kind of destroyer as the Johnston and the Homan and the Hoke. So here comes the last of the 3. So, boom. I love these Fletchers. I love these things. To me, that Pacific just looks great. I'm real happy with that. So anyway, I just thought I would share that little adventure with you guys. So human and whole, yeah. So anyway, the water looks great. So we can find either that or do it some other way. In any event, it's certainly doable. So that would be nice to be able to do those things. It'd be real nice. So that's the story of my little trip to Nashville, Tennessee. So now let's do this. Let's go to Facebook. We'll take some questions. I'm running on I've been up since about 4 o'clock this morning and I only had about 4 hours sleep. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get the very least energetic show that I can possibly deliver. Okay. All right, so we'll go to BillWhittle.com first. And we're starting on questions early. Good chance we can actually get to Facebook. Be nice. Come on. I imagine 1 or 2 of these might have something to do with the election. If not, we will. I have no doubt there will be some of those in the Facebook page. So we got a few things to say about that too. Obviously, here we go. And I will move you over to here. I think. Yes. Good. Okay, I think that's working. All right, I just got to set up this window here, and then I probably have to put on my cogitation spectacles. Okay. Marusha, this question's from last week. I will get to it because I said I would. Don't let me move on, but I'm going to skip it for now to see if there's anything about, yeah. So I'm going to go into election stuff, but I will get to this. I'm just doing it out of order. Hopefully that'll work, and you can, chastise away, as the case may be. So this is from GK Masterson. New question in my district. I guess it's Mississippi District 2. There were some definite election law violations that we have physical documented proof of. Would you be willing to talk with Brian Flowers and let him share the proof they've gathered with you and possibly help him get word out to a wider audience? I'm asking because my mother is on his volunteer staff, and this is not conspiracy theory stuff. There's real corruption down here. Yeah, there's real corruption everywhere. And the Thorough Ryan says his grandfather was on the 712 Fletcher destroyer. That's just cool. There's a couple of them still afloat. Sorry, I get distracted easily. So here's the thing. Certainly I'd like to see the data. We're at the point now where we did today. We did the first of the full-scale new right angles. We came in and we shot. It started at 5:30 in the morning, and we shot about almost an hour and 20 minutes, where we just had kind of opening banter, which it turned into, I think, one of the better segments about election integrity. And then I did one about messaging. Steve Green did one about Trump, and Scott did one about kind of the process that worked in Florida. So we know that the corruption is there. It doesn't seem like it was as flagrant as before, but then again, maybe it is, and maybe it didn't have to be. I don't know. But in the reason I mentioned the show we just did was I was like really pushing hard for the it's funny because we went to these electronic voting machines because it'd be faster and more convenient. Now it's now with the electronic voting machines, instead of getting them at midnight, we get them a week or two later. The amount of look, Scott's position was there's no more fraud with electronic voting machines than there were with paper ballots, and there's always been episodes of fraud. I don't believe that, but let's say it's true. It's not important at this point. What's important now is confidence, is people's confidence in it. And I don't have any confidence at all in these electronic systems. I have no confidence in them at all. And I think half the country doesn't have confidence in them. And so whether or not they're working then is at this point irrelevant. I've seen enough squirreliness for me to be completely convinced that they're worthless. But even for the sake of the argument, let's say that they're not. It doesn't matter if they're actually working perfectly at this point, because there have been enough errors in the past that people just don't trust them. I don't trust them either, at all. So I think we need to go back to doing all the things that used to work well. It wasn't like on, when we had the CHADs or the little, computer cards, the simple computer cards, just the little dots, right? It wasn't like we just elected Republicans or conservatives with that system. That thing worked out really, really well for us for decades and decades and decades. And it was much faster, and it was much more secure, and there was a physical record you could go back to and look at. So if you've got a contested election, you can go to the vault and haul them out. And then very slowly and methodically, hi, Mike, this is the Bill Whittle channel. We talk about politics and pop culture, mostly politics on Thursday night and pop culture on Monday nights. In any event, we do a show three times a week called Right Angle. And as for me, I'm the voice of a generation. And first time chat over there from Florida Girl, 1776. Great name. Okay, so anyway, here's the point, right? Let's just say that's the case. You can go back to a contested election and do it. And the point I made earlier, I'll make just now because it's a somewhat different audience. Look, the electoral system of the United States went off the rails in 2000. And I don't know if anybody really realizes exactly how far off the rails it got and how early it got off the rails. So let's just get into the Wayback Machine and go back to the 2000 election in Florida. Before I start that, let me just say, because I will forget it, that because of the humiliation, the national humiliation of the Florida recount, Florida decided to do something about it. And now Florida is the model. It's like, pow. No one's got any complaints about accuracy. They have their results within half an hour of the polls closing. It's just everything in Florida is just working like humming. We'll get to that more later tonight. But Florida 2000. So those of you who remember, and those of you who are too young to remember, the election between George Bush and Al Gore hung on Florida. Whoever won Florida was going to win the election. And the election in Florida was so tight. I think, without question, the tightest election that there's ever been. And so what you ended up with was the Democrats continuously suing, and their argument was, we need to know what voter intent is. I got ahead of myself. What did the law say? And what was the actual law in Florida in the year 2000? Okay. It's real simple. The law for Florida in the 2000 election was the votes will be counted by machine. They're all various forms of the either paper chads or the black dots. They'll be counted by machine. That will be the result. If the result falls within a certain range, it was either 1 or 2% of the vote, maybe even 0.5%. But if it's very, very close, and only if it's very, very close, then there can be another recount, another mechanical recount, right? So you have a mechanical recount. If it's very close, you can get another mechanical recount. That's the rule. Okay. So what happens? So they run the ballots. Bush wins by 520 votes, something like that. And so Gore says, well, we want to recount. So they recounted it, and Bush still won. And that was the end of it. According to the law, that's it. It's over. When you had to count, okay, you got to recount. Recount shows Bush wins. Over. It's done. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened. We started rewriting the law on the fly because the Democrats said, well, a lot of people voted for Bush and didn't want to. We had a lot of people calling us and saying, I can't believe I actually voted for Bush, the butterfly ballots and all the rest of it. Put that aside for a second because, frankly, your vote is not your opinion. Your opinion is your opinion. A vote is not an opinion. A vote is a process. It's a procedure. It's a series of steps that you have to take. And if you vote for the wrong guy, then okay. But that's what we saw. We saw the Democrats break the law. The law said a count and a recount, over. But they wouldn't let it go, and the press went with them and said, we're depriving people of their voice. Don't you think in a democracy, blah, 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 blah. And once again, even then, the Republicans kind of, well, we don't want to be seen like, we're not depriving people. Yes, you are. There are people. It's like, nobody had the guts just to say, hey, if you cannot finish the ballot correctly, you're supposed to check it, If you don't do that, then that's too bad for you, right? If you're not smart enough to do that, and it's not a big deal, then maybe you shouldn't be voting in the first place. They never came out and said that. No, they just let the Democrats run their emotion machine. And so what you ended up with was all of these, not all the counties, just the ones where Gore had a chance to win. You're seeing these guys, so they had these things called punch cards, your voting thing. You'd lock this paper card into a groove, right? And then you had a little, like a little pin, and you just go punch, 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 punch. And you punch out the little squares on this paper ballot. And those squares are called, rectangles, are called chads. I don't know why. Probably because it was invented by a guy named Chad. So these things are called chads, right? And when you finish doing this, virtually all the time when you hit the thing, it just detaches, right? But the instructions are, when you finish voting and you pull your ballot out of the voting machine before you drop it off into the box, make sure that all the chads have been detached. Well, what we ended up seeing was, for weeks and weeks and weeks, we saw guys holding a ballot up to a light with a magnifying glass, and they were looking for dimpled chads. In other words, they were looking for a vote for Gore that maybe, oh, look, see, there's a little dent on it. See, the guy meant to vote for Gore, but it turned out that, he just didn't push hard enough or something. And we just let it happen. We just let it happen. And from that moment forward, it became just a joke, right? It's whoever can make the loudest noise wins. And the left has said since then that the Supreme Court, it wasn't a democracy, it wasn't a democratic vote. No, the Supreme Court selected George Bush because it was a Republican, slightly leading Republican court. That's not what happened. What happened was the Supreme Court said to the state of Florida, your electors will be in Washington on the date that they're supposed to be, and you don't get to keep counting until you get the answer you want. Whatever you do internally is your business, but they have to be here on time. And once they realized they couldn't just keep counting and counting and counting and coming up with, oh, look, my God, what a nut. I forgot to bring my station wagon that I bring the ballots to the counting center for. It looks like I left a box on the floor. Yep. Hard to believe, huh? Yeah, what a knucklehead. Anyway, here they are. So 600 votes for Al Gore. Okay, how many for Bush? None. That's literally happened in the Al Franken campaign. Somebody found some 1,000 votes or something, every one of them for Al Franken. Amazing how that thing works, right? If we cannot enforce this, if we cannot have confidence in the voting system, then that is the end, not only of this country and this republic, it's the end of the idea of a republic, right? If you cannot depend upon the legitimacy of the vote. Look, I understand there will always be some cheating, right? Some precinct somewhere, somebody's going to lose something. You got 300 million people, yes. But this was in the case of 2000, this was statewide, and now we're talking about systemic problems. And I'm just trying to be fair about this, right? It's at the point now, this is what should really scare people, because this isn't a conservative or a liberal thing. Our country's at the point now where if we win an election, the left will say that we cheated, and if the left wins election, we'll say that they cheated because the electoral system is so badly, horribly mangled and is so far away from legitimacy and accountability and transparency and all the rest of it, that whoever, if you wanted to destroy this country, the best way and the fastest and the easiest way that you could do it would be to make the American public lose faith in the electoral system, both sides, right? And that's where we are right now. So as far as your question goes, GK, yeah, I'd certainly love to hear about it. And the problem is that, needless to say, I thought this thing was going to be a blowout. But you can't fix the problem until you get elected. Now, as it turns out, however, and I'm generally in favor of this. In fact, I'm almost universally in favor of federalism, which is kind of a weird name for the movement that is against the federal government. Federalism is the idea that the state should have as much power as possible. So every state has different election standards, different election mechanisms, so on. And in order to change those, you can't change those at the federal level. That's not something Congress can do. It's not something if you had the House, the Senate, and the President can do. That's something that you have to do at the state level. And a state level is easier to do. So, I mean, stay with me on this, right? If you clean it up in the red states, the only place that you probably wouldn't have a good chance of going in there and fixing the problem on a state level would be the bluest of the blue states. They're probably gone anyway. If they want to have a corrupt election system to go along with their ridiculous economic model and their taxation, then that's fine. They can just slowly rust away, like they're doing now. But as far as the rest of it goes, we got to get this thing in shape. Now, with all that said, I don't think that the red wave was there and that we got cheated out of it. I don't think there's any evidence of that. Now, I have a completely different opinion about 2020, but I didn't see, and maybe it didn't happen because it didn't have to happen. But much more important to talk about what we did wrong than to talk about things like this. I'm not trying to minimize it, GK. In fact, I want to hear the details. But to make a case for this again, especially on a national level, it's news to nobody, right? It's like if if I say, hey, here's evidence of voter fraud, who's going to be convinced? We already believe that there's voter fraud, and the other side's already been told that there's voter fraud. So the only issue is, what can people agree upon? And since the Republicans don't know how to argue a moral argument, then we'll continue to get this garbage. And do you want to know what the moral argument is? It's a real easy one, right? Real easy. The moral argument for this is, you say we have to have an election day. If you can't have an absentee ballot, you have to apply for it months in advance, and these are issued only with a legitimate reason for why you can't vote in person. For example, in Pennsylvania, we got some questions about the Fetterman race. When I got to Nashville, the first thing I heard was that 700,000 people in Pennsylvania had already voted before the Fetterman debate with Oz, right? Before the debate. So, in the discussion we had this morning, Scott was in favor of, he didn't have a problem with early voting. I have a huge problem with it. And I have a huge problem with mail-in voting as well, because I think they're all conducive to error. Forget fraud, error. And so the argument you'll hear is, well, it's more convenient to vote. I live in California. We got our ballots 2 months before the election. So the argument would be, well, it's much more convenient, Well, this isn't about convenience. It's not a big deal, for you to have control of the country that you live under, to 2 times, once every 2 years, go down and spend a couple hours. That doesn't seem to me like an unreasonable demand on your time to have an election day. That's number one. Number two, the argument about voter ID, and this is the one that I just want to use to just drive the stake through the heart of these people. Really, I really do. All the progressives say that requiring you to prove who you are, meaning voter ID, show an ID, show your driver's license or whatever at the polling place. They say it suppresses the vote because black people are not capable of getting IDs. That's exactly what they say. It's what they say on campuses. This guy did this great interview. He went to a number of campuses, or at least one progressive campus, talked to a bunch of young, rich, white kids, and every single one of those young, rich, white kids said that, black people, no, it's completely unfair to black people because they can't go down and get IDs as easily as white people do. So then the same guy went into the middle of a black neighborhood and said, do you think there should IDs for vote? And they said, well, of course you should have IDs for vote. And then he said, well, would you believe me if I told you that a bunch of white progressive kids at college campuses said that you guys aren't able to get IDs? In other words, these white progressives are saying you're not smart enough to get an ID. And some of the people just plain laughed. They said, well, how am I going to buy wine with my dinner? How am I going to get on an airplane? Well, black people don't get on airplanes, you see. Black people aren't capable of getting on airplanes. They're not capable of getting on airplanes because they're not capable of going down to get an ID. And that's the racism that's so inherent in these people. It's just this constant, what's the word I'm looking for? Just this constant patronizing attitude. And it's garbage. So if somebody were to throw the voter ID thing at me, I would hit him with that and say, unlike you Democrat racists, you slaveholders, the Confederacies, the Democratic Party leaving the Union, unlike you and your entire history in this republic, I don't think that black people are inferior to white people. I don't think that black people are incapable of getting an ID. I don't think it's too much to ask a black person to spend one day every 2 years to go and elect a government when it's not unreasonable to ask that of a white person or an Asian person or Latino. It's condescension. Thanks. I just couldn't get the word condensation. That's what it is. And just smack them and just keep smacking them in the face with how unbelievably racist that is. What do you mean no, it's suppression. Now, there's a better argument. Because you got to put these things into the ground, and then you have to hammer a stake through their heart, and then you have to take the corpse of the vampire, and you have to burn it with gasoline, and you have to mix the ashes with concrete, and you have to throw the concrete into the Marianas Trench. That's what you have to do with these kind of things. The bigger argument is people will say, well, it's if there's a little voter fraud, then voter suppression is worse than voter fraud, because voter suppression is you're taking somebody's vote away. Voter fraud is voter suppression, and voter suppression is voter fraud. Voter fraud is voter suppression. If if I cast a legal ballot and I go straight Republican down the ticket, and an illegal voter or somebody who's voting twice casts another ballot that goes straight Democrat, that person has canceled my vote. They've stolen my vote. So if somebody illegally votes the opposite of me, then they have stolen my vote. If it turns out that they legally vote the opposite of me, that's how the machine works. But to say that oh well, it doesn't really matter that we make sure that the citizens, as long as every vote is counted, it doesn't matter if there's extra votes in there. No, it matters enormously that there's extra votes in there. Enormously matters, because the people that they are recruiting to vote without IDs, because that's what they're doing, they're recruiting people to come and vote without IDs, are the people who vote for Democrats. If it turned out that all of the illegal voters in this country were, PhDs from Germany who voted Republican, then you can guarantee you we would not only have ID cards, we would have probably tattoos or something. We'd probably have some irreducible proof that you are who you say you are. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about in terms of the election. So, look, Marusha, GK, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it for my own curiosity. What I do without afterwards, I don't know. It'll depend on what it consists of. All right. It's got a rocket on it. Good enough for me. So from Henry Lumley, and don't worry, there's plenty more elections stuff coming up. From Henry Lumley, has a big picture of a rocket engine. It says, hey, Bill, since the Monday show got bumped, and this does have a political side of the question, I wanted to share a post from SpaceX on Twitter as of last Friday. They completed the build on their 200th Raptor 2 rocket engine. They are apparently building them at a rate of 1 Raptor 2 per day. See, when you're building one enormously efficient, effective, reusable rocket engine a day, you're serious. Do you hear what I said, Boeing? Funny enough, the Merlin vacuum engine team completed their 200th Merlin vacuum second stage on the same weekend. So they're different engines. And the reason they're different engines is because, well, a lot of reasons, but the main reason is on a first stage, you generally need an awful lot more thrust, less efficiency, and also the design of a rocket bell is different in the atmosphere than it is in a vacuum, just to get maximum efficiency out of it. To juxtapose these production numbers, I've also included a picture of 4 of the RS-25 engines used on the Space Launch System. Those are used engines from the shuttle program, and they cost $100 million each. These particular engines have made 21 flights previously during the shuttle program, but thanks to SLS, they'll be thrown away for per launch. Yeah. So what do you say about SLS other than this? When people say, why don't we have government health care? It's like, well, we have a government space program. We have a private space program. Why don't we just compare these two? Why don't we do that? Right? One guy is building a rocket engine a day. They'll get hundreds of flights out of these things. He's using his own money, by the way. He's not taking your money against you. He's just using his own money to build these rocket engines, and he reuses them, and he's going to get the launch cost down to probably 1% of what it used to be. And NASA, the government, is using reusable rocket engines from the shuttle and throwing them away 4 at a time. So what does that tell you about the Artemis program? It tells you that we have a fixed number of shuttle engines. I don't know what that number is, but I would want to guess it's probably in the neighborhood of 70 or 80, something. I don't know. And when those things are gone, then Artemis is gone. The entire program is gone, right? We're going to use reusable engines. We're going to chuck them in the ocean. That's the government. That's how government works. It's just unbearably, disgracefully stupid. Okay, Henry's got another space question. I'll skip that for the time being. Rodney Rowe, this site is really confusing as to how to post questions, but here I go again trying to post for Bill. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you for your persistence, and we'll take a look at that. Here's a brief instructional video on how to turn on super chats and super thanks. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, because I've been known to be a little bit absent-minded at times. I click the link, and I'm going to take that link and I'm going to turn it into a separate window, and then I will watch it when we are done. And it concludes with Take Our Money, Please, and I would be delighted. Thank you very much to go on for the trouble for that. This is exactly what I was looking for. And hopefully I can get on that tomorrow, because I'm going to be in here tomorrow, by golly. So thank you for that. Yeah. Yes, yeah, offering my nephew a couple $100. He's highly qualified because he's 14. And I'm not joking either. That's his primary qualification. But thank you for the suggestion. I appreciate the link very much. I'll try to get those in next show. From Charles Tomes, from an undisclosed location in the Midwest, Darth Chuck the Merciless posits. Well, there's a sentence for you. Darth Chuck the Merciless posits. On a recent voyage, I was conversing with a company owner that specializes in small diameter tubing assemblies. Their largest customer is the contractor upgrading the M1 Abrams tank. The assemblies were designed in the late 1970s such that there are bends and other features in place that make them impossible to manufacture using modern CNC machines. Everything is handmade on antique equipment. This brings to mind two topics. One, is making something excellent a double-edged sword? If it's good enough, then would it be more likely to be replaced in the market sooner using current and less expensive manufacturing? But if it's so good that 50 years later it would cost more to design and build a newer, easier to build replacement, you end up re-winging the B-52 and the A-10, re-engineering the KC-135 B-52. Two, businesses booming. All the countries that have Russian tanks are buying used, upgraded M1 Abrams thanks to Vlad's folly. I find that somehow both wonderful and slightly alarming. I don't want to ever face an Abrams. This is hard intel, not speculation, so the opinion and speculation that Russian military hardware will be trash is absolutely correct, with hard numbers behind it, at least for main battle tanks. Discuss that as all. Thank you, Charles. So the first people who are dealing with the catastrophe of the quality of Russian equipment are the Russians. The second people that are dealing with are the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians are using a mix of legacy Russian, probably Soviet equipment, but that's not what they're winning with. They're winning with state-of-the-art Western equipment. They're winning with javelins and MLAWs and Stingers, and we've been down that road 1,000 times. But the real loser here is the player that either bought or copied all of this Russian gear, thinking that it was at least a rough match for Western stuff, and that's China. So China's jets are all derivatives of the Su-38, the Su-27, the Su-35. They've just reverse engineered it. They've got their new, was it the J-20 so-called stealth jet that the Chinese have? Things the size of a barn, and the Felon, the Russian stealth jet, supposed fifth generation fighter. If you could hit the like button, that would be great, by the way. Thank you. Somebody, Jeffrey Adams, pointed that out. So look, as far as I'm concerned, it's vaporware until it's in combat, okay? They've only got, I think, six Felons in the world, total manufactured. So that alone means it's not a threat. But in addition to that, where's the neocon support? DeSantis. Okay, well, so Bill Whittle, NATO simp. Yeah, it's me. I'm a NATO simp, Joe Blow. I am absolutely a NATO simp. So back to NATO. The weapons that we have work, and the weapons that the Russians don't, and the weapons that the Chinese copied from the Russians don't. And I will believe that those two jets are fighter jets, stealth fighter jets, when I see them in combat. Until then, it's just an assertion, right? It's an assertion. Stealth is not easy. Kisama01 says the Chinese stealth jet is so good it doesn't exist. Well done. Well done. Yeah, exactly. So I saw for the first time, just a couple days ago by happy coincidence, the new version of the M1. Is it the M1? It's not the M1A2. It's really pretty cool looking. Let me see if I can find that. Because it's like, ooh. They've changed significant changes. It still looks like an M1, but I don't think there's anybody in the turret now. I think the turret's entirely remote. Hang on a second. M1 upgrade. Yeah, this thing I saw. Yeah, there it is. It's just kind of cool. The M1A2, It's pretty revolutionary, at least the picture I saw. Yeah, here we go. Kids, hopefully this will work. So here's the next generation of the M1, according to Popular Mechanics. I'll scale that up a little bit for you. So you can see a family resemblance, but there's a lot of new stuff there. And that tank looks badass to me, frankly. It just looks like a mean tank. Turret certainly seems to be smaller. The Abram X, yeah. Oh, so it's a technology demonstrator. Okay, fair enough. I'm glad that we're getting a new tank because the Abrams has been out there it's getting a little long in the tooth. But to go to your question, Charles, the issue is occasionally you can build something that is so close to perfect that it really doesn't. Why doesn't this just delete? So close to perfect that there's almost no replacement for it. I don't know what the hell the problem with that thing is. All right, we just could go away then. All right. One more time. Go. All right, gone. So you build. The examples you gave are great examples, right? There's some classic airplanes out there. C-130 Hercules is a classic design. There's no way to improve on that design for that mission. The C-17 is an astonishingly capable aircraft, and it is in many ways more capable than the C-130, but it is bigger and it lands faster, and so the C-130 Hercules isn't being replaced because there's no need to replace it. You can't improve on it; just make it worse. It's like Lord of the Rings, and the same is true for the B-52. Right? There have been proposals since I was, this high, to take jetliners and convert them into bombers. It seems like a good idea. 767 could hold, I don't know, I want to say 15, 20 times the bomb load of a B-52. If you've ever seen a B-52 up close, it's a small airplane. By modern standards, it really is. Once you get into these wide-body jets and you're used to looking out the window at 767s and things like that, B-52 is a shockingly small airplane. So is a B-29, so is a B-17. I look like I'm getting my hair cut. Well said, exactly, drunk MTGS. It's like, get a little thing here, a little talc here, a little brush, we're good to go. So, as far as the M1 goes, I guess the answer to that is, I don't think you can retroactively go back and say they made the wrong decision by making this essentially a custom handmade barrel, right? This tank came out in the I want to say in the late 70s. And it was designed to do what it was supposed to do in the Cold War, which is kill Soviet tanks coming through the Fulda Gap. And while we never had a chance, as I pointed out in in the Civil War episode on this, the Cold War episode on this, we never got a chance to test the Abrams against the T-72 in Germany, thank God. But we did get a chance to test them at. Is it 71 Easting? It's. I knew all this stuff. The tank battle against Iraq, where McMaster's Eagle group of M1s took out everything. They just took out. He personally, I think, either McMaster personally or certainly his platoon, took out 3 T-72s in less than 10 seconds. I think it was his tank. Is it 63 Easting? I don't remember. I'm embarrassed to say. 73 Easting. Thank you. I knew it was a number and an Easting. Okay, so while we didn't get to check it against the Soviets, we did get to check it against the Iraqis. Now, to be fair, they're probably not as well trained as the Soviets were, but then again, the Soviets weren't as well trained as the Soviets were. So the level of dominance of the M1 over the T-72 in Iraq shows that if we had to face Soviet armor in Europe, we would have eaten their lunch, especially after Ukraine. Because as far as Ukraine goes, everybody's saying, the Russian weapons are no good, and the Russian morale is no good. Both of those are true, but it's the Russian doctrine. It's their command and control. It's all of the invisible stuff that wins wars, right? We have air-land doctrine. Now it's land, air, space, and sea doctrine. So the U.S. system is makes it look easy because we put a lot of thought into it. You know, what happens in the U.S. Armed Forces doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Most countries don't have the doctrine or the technology, and most Western countries have the technology, but they don't have enough units to actually do what we do on the scale we do. The U.S. military can have oh, thank you, Rashidar got it right. Got to get them all in there. It's like the LGBTQ, blah, blah, blah. Land, sea, air, space, cyber, and human. Okay, but basically what it comes down to is, in our military, we don't send the Army, we send the military. So a sergeant with a radio can make a phone call to an Air Force satellite, which gets relayed to a Navy carrier, which puts it on an F-18 jet, which is refueled by an Air Force tanker, and then boom, and it just does it, and it just works. And the Russian system is unbearable. So anyway, I do have a kind of a cool story about that, though. This business of like building a custom thing. I was at a hangar, 7-8 years ago, something like that, and somebody, wealthy guy, had a lot of restored aircraft, and he had a P-51 that looked like it rolled off the assembly line about 15 minutes ago. It's absolutely, everything on it is pristine, and it's 100% P-51. It's amazing, right? Amazing. And when I was talking to the guys that were doing the restoration of that, because it's not the original aluminum, on some level it's probably not even the original plane. They reskinned everything, and you get the idea. But the story that I got told by the guys who were doing the restoration on the P-51 was, anybody who knows anything about airplanes knows that the P-51 has this incredibly cool belly scoop. It's the defining characteristic of that airplane. And it is aerodynamically designed, believe it or not, so that the scoop actually generates a little bit of thrust. Not drag, a little bit of thrust. Don't ask me, I don't know how, but it's what I've heard. So anyway, it's a very complex thing to build because it's one perpetual curve in 3 dimensions. It's constantly curving, and it's perfect, beautiful. So the guys doing the restoration, no problem. They just found a existing P-51. Maybe it was the original airplane. Who knows? And they basically made a cast of the scoop, and then they turned that into a plug, and then they hammered the aluminum down around it, right? And sure enough, there's your shape. Well, they did this, and they couldn't get the aluminum off. It wouldn't pop off the plug. They couldn't get it off. And they tried everything. They tried all kinds of, like these super new, Teflon anti-stick things, didn't work. They did all of this stuff. They couldn't get this piece of aluminum to pop off of this plug. So they looked around, and they found a guy who had worked at North American Aviation and had built been on the assembly line for the original P-51. And according to the story that I heard, as I heard it from the guys, he said, no, it generates thrust, believe it or not. It's not powering the airplane, but you get the idea. So the story I heard from these guys was that they got a hold of a guy who used to work at North American, and they said to him, sir, we got a problem. We're doing restoration on a P-51, and we've got a problem. We were wondering maybe you could help us with it. And without any further prompting, I said, you can't get the belly scoop to pop off the plug, can you? And everybody's just like looking at each other. It's like, how did you know? I said, yeah, we had a lot of problems with that. So now this part I'm making up. The rest of it is verbatim. This part I'm making up because I don't remember the details. But basically, he said, okay, so what you need to do is you need to go out, get 4 parts bacon grease, 4 crayons, melt those down, whatever, right? He gives them this list of things in order. This is what you need, and here's the parts and so on. Mix that up, slap it on there, and it'll pop right off. And that's what they did, and that's what happened. So that's a great example of painting yourself into a corner where the people who used to know how to do something don't exist anymore. And when I talked with Mike Rowe, he said, no, I don't know, it was Mike Rowe or John Ratzenberger's been on this too. But they said that we could not build the Golden Gate Bridge today if we wanted to. If the thing got down for whatever reason, then we couldn't rebuild that bridge. We'd have to build something else. We couldn't rebuild that bridge. We don't know how to do it. And that is a little distressing, a little distressing. So I'm glad to hear that they're upgrading the Abrams, and the Abrams had a big part in the Cold War, even though the Cold War was never fought. One of the reasons it was never fought. Thousand Island dressing. Yes, that's it. That's exactly right. Leolis AOC says, and Thousand Island dressing. That's right. He said Thousand Island dressing. I remember now. Anyway, that's that. All right, here's Martin Archer. Back in Paleolithic times and early Neolithic, humans lived in small tribes. Those who didn't pull their weight and do their fair share of the hunting and gathering and crop tending were cast out from the tribe, much like the Harfoots. Those cast-offs may well have died in the wild by themselves. The thinning of the herd would improve the gene pool and make for a tight-knit tribe, which may well have cultivated more productive teamwork and led to human progress. Nowadays, such parasites get jobs for life, can't be fired, overgenerous pensions, government work, or become permanent welfare dependents, now that there aren't plenty of people on welfare who truly need it, and generally parasitize wherever they go. Sadly, I think that over recent generations, the gene pool has been weakened. All you need to do is look around you. Here and in the rest of the world, parasitic leftism has triumphed, and we live in their world now, not our own. Suggestion for Stratosphere Studio: wear a short sleeve shirt and tie like in the 1960s Mission Controller. I was going to say I won't do it unless I have the pocket protector and the slide rule, but he said with the pocket protector and the slide rule. Great, good idea. I like that idea. Okay, so those of you who've got your drinking bingo cards out, here it comes. Here comes the big trifecta. I talked about this every week for 6 months or longer, but now I haven't talked about it for several years. So it's time to talk about it again. Everybody lean back and relax. You're about to get the RK story. So many of you who are regulars on Stratosphere Lounge know this story. 300 people live. This is great. If you stay for one thing, stay for this, because this is actually very cool. So a researcher was trying to figure out why do people become either liberals or conservatives? What is it about a person's psychology that draws them to these two relatively oppositional ways of doing things, philosophies? Some people just seem born to become liberals, and others seem to be born to become conservatives. What is it that's actually driving that? We did an awful lot of research on specifically mammalian biology. And what he found was that different types of animals have a different reproductive strategy, which means that since that is the successful reproductive strategy, not for that particular species, but for that kind of an animal, then whatever is working, and that's what gets passed down. But what he found was that the reproductive strategy of creatures like rabbits is very, very different than the reproductive strategy of creatures like wolves. Very different. So he basically came up with an equation. It basically said R/K, R of K over area, I think. But basically R is the reproductive rate. And I think the K is it the land area? It doesn't matter. Forget that I don't know that. Here's what it comes down to, okay? For rabbits to succeed, the best strategy for rabbits is to have as many children as possible and to invest as little time in them as possible, because any time that you expend on a rabbit more than the bare bones minimum is time that you are wasting, because you could be making new rabbits, right? So the K is carrying capacity of the land, right? Okay, so here you go. So basically, imagine that there's an endless field of clover, right? Just endless clover. And you put a couple of rabbits in there. Well, the rabbits are going to do what rabbits do, and then they're going to quickly have a large number of offspring. They're going to grow to sexual maturity very fast. They're going to have offspring, and it's just going to geometrically multiply until it's an endless field of rabbits. Why does that work for rabbits? Well, it works for rabbits because they're prey animals, primarily. And you can spend, a mother or father rabbit can spend 4 years raising a baby rabbit, but they're not going to make the rabbit go any faster. They're not going to make the rabbit any smarter. They're not going to improve the rabbit's chances of survival by investing more time on the rabbit. That is called the R strategy. In other words, we're going to make it. It's also, by the way, and I don't know if I've ever made this connection before. If I haven't, it's long overdue. This is the Cold War, by the way. The Cold War was an RK struggle. The Soviets said, let's make lots and lots and lots of stuff. That's the R strategy. That's the rabbit strategy. Let's make lots and lots of rabbits. Anything we do beyond making more rabbits is a waste of time, because we could be making new rabbits rather than making these ones better. Now, the opposite of that is the strategy that wolves have. Wolves are a K-type species. Wolves have a much smaller, much more limited food supply. Rabbits can eat lots and lots of grass, but a wolf has to work, especially in the wintertime. And since the wolf is a hunter, a predator, the techniques of being a predator, how you sneak up on prey and so on, those are things that have to be taught. It doesn't take a lot of intelligence to sneak up on a blade of grass, but to become a hunter, successful hunter, you will see this with all mammalian predators. You see it with lions, you see it with orcas, you see it with wolves, you see it with all of them. The predators have a completely different strategy than the prey. The prey strategy is make as many copies of ourselves as possible. The predators will take some, but this is the way to bet. The predator strategy is, okay, if we make lots and lots of wolves, the wolves will starve. They'll starve because there's not enough food for them, but mostly they'll starve because they're not very good hunters. And they're not very good hunters because we haven't spent time on them. So the K strategy is, instead of making lots and lots of things, make far fewer things, but make them much more capable. It's an investment to teach a wolf puppy how to hunt. It's an investment. It takes a lot of time compared to, and the breeding rate is slower, and the number of children is slower, all of that. But for the predator, the K strategy, the quality strategy, is the way to go. Same thing with NATO. We didn't want the money, and we especially didn't want to lose the lives. The Soviets would take as many losses as they needed. You're seeing it in Ukraine now. Throw people at it until it goes away. We weren't willing to take those casualties. And since we weren't willing to take those casualties, we couldn't go one-to-one with them, because we'd lose as many people as they would, and we're not willing to do that. So we had to go with the K strategy. In the Cold War, we had to say, we don't have as many weapons as the Soviets do, not nearly as many weapons. So our weapons have to be much better than theirs. That's what we're good at, is the technology. So it's not like one of our fighters has to beat one of their fighters. One of our fighters has to beat 8 of their fighters. That's basically how the numbers worked out. And I personally am very much drawn to this K strategy, and virtually everybody listening to this is the same way. Now, here's where it gets interesting. What this guy found was that there are parts of the brain that are, believe it or not, more developed in conservatives than are in liberals, and vice versa. And he found that most of these have to do with the amygdala, which is it's like the warning center of the brain. But there's noticeable differences between people who are extremely liberal and extremely conservative. And so what he found was that because humans are so adaptable, we live everywhere. We live in the snow, we live in jungles, we live in deserts, we live in caves, we live on the ocean. Humans adapt to anything, and they eat anything. Because we're so adaptable, we are capable of both of those strategies. In fact, we're not only capable of being either R or K, we're capable of switching as the environment switches. So when there's an abundance of things, and you don't have to hunt and you don't have to work hard, then R is the way to go, because it's an endless field of clover, right? When things get tough, then you have to go to the K strategy, because now there's not enough food. Everybody's going to die if you don't get good at doing something, and you can only have fewer of them. And what he found was that you could measure a shift in the psychology of humans from R to K and back again, depending on how much ambient prosperity there is. In other words, are we in an endless field of clover, or are we on a frozen mountainside where we have to track a single rabbit forever and hope to catch it, right? Not a lot of food out there. And so what happens is, when a society is in trouble, when they're struggling, they go to the K strategy. When they're struggling, they realize that they have to make the best people they can, not the most people they can, the best people they can. When society becomes comfortable enough, then they no longer have that biological imperative to invest effort and time into each individual person. Why? Right? So the analogy is really simple. If you live in a society where you want to succeed and you basically want to get ahead, or at least stay even, it's probably worth your while. If your kid wants to be a doctor, it's probably worth your while to spend 20 years, who am I kidding, 25, 30 years of education on that kid, and $400,000, $500,000 more maybe, because he wants to be a doctor, and that doctor will pay for that because of the value of the doctor, because the doctor is extremely good at something. So that's a K selection to have a doctor. Now, if you take that exact same kid and that exact same parent, and it turns out that not only is it possible for the kid who's going to spend 20 years of hard work and $500,000 of training, not only is it possible for him to make a living, but rapidly approaching the point where he's making about the same living as the doctor, then there's no point in doing the K. There's no reason to do it. K is hard. R is easy. So as society becomes more and more affluent and we have more and more money, we do more and more of these welfare things. We start paying people not to work. And as we pay more people not to work, then that becomes the smart play. It's not unreasonable. It's perfectly logical. If everything is free, why would you work? So there you go. Now, the reason people have problems with this is because Americans are extraordinarily K. Extraordinarily K. All of the qualities of predators are strong in Americans. And for those of you who are ready to say, war for oil and all the rest of that stuff, the kind of things I'm talking about are K-selected species are extremely territorial aware. If you have a pack of wolves and another pack of wolves comes into that pack of wolves' territory, then they are going to fight each other to the death. And pretty soon there's only going to be one pack of wolves left, because there's not enough food on the land for both of them. So they get very, very good at fighting. And not only get good at fighting, they get good at things like hierarchy. Wolves have a very clear social structure. There's the top wolf, alpha wolf, and everybody knows their place because they have to cooperate. Rabbits don't cooperate. Rabbits don't have to cooperate. You don't need any help to eat the clover. You just sit right next to the guy, right? So those qualities of competition and cooperation are K-type behaviors. And there's no reason to have a competitive rabbit, because if the food is endless, why would you invest the time and effort to make a better rabbit when it's not going to benefit you? So that's basically it. So what this guy is basically saying is that not only are people attracted to either one or the other political party because they tend to represent those values that are very different to each other, but over time, the population will change, and we're becoming more our population every day. We're getting softer, less. The entire idea of competition is becoming anathema, at least to the left, right? Correct? I mean, they don't want to they don't want to compete. Do you know who doesn't want to compete? Losers don't want to compete. Losers want everything to be equal, because they know that they're not going to be as good as the average. And they're certainly not going to be as good as the peak. If there's free competition, then the people who are the worst at doing things are the ones who are going to suffer more. So they want everything equal, and the only way to make it equal, since they can't be more than what they are, is they want a society where the successful people are shackled and brought down to their level. That's what they consider to be fair and justice. That is equality of outcome. That's a form of equality. That's what equity is, right? You've got all these advantages, so we're going to take from you. We're going to give it to all these people who don't have any advantages, and so on and so on and so on. So we're going to shackle this person, essentially steal from them, and give it to somebody else who may in fact be needy, or may in fact be doing nothing but sitting, watching TV or playing computer games. Well, watching the internet. Nobody watches TV anymore, right? So the more of this free stuff is available, the more rational our strategy is. The problem is that if things go south, and they do, then there is a mass die-off, right? There's a mass die-off, and only things that survive are the case. Because if that endless field of clover goes away, now you've just a few patches of grass. Those millions and millions of rabbits that you put out there, they're all just going to starve to death. Some of them will survive, and eventually enough of them will survive so that they'll match the balance with the predators. But there's going to be this huge die-off of rabbits. So there you go, right? You got an endless field of clover, all this prosperity. You got millions of rabbits. If those clover goes away, those rabbits are going to die off. The wolves that are hunting the rabbits are not going to get hurt nearly so bad because they don't have as many numbers, right? They're much more specialized. So we were an extraordinarily K-based society because things like initiative. Now, even though Clint Eastwood, my buddy, Clint, I just call him Clint, says, made a film about this. It wasn't a great film because he used the actual people, and I think that was a mistake. One of the few mistakes he's made. But in any event, I want to say this was during the Bush years. I'm not 100% sure of the date, but that seems about right, like 2007, 8, somewhere around there. Might have been early Obama. I don't know. I don't remember. But there was a train, a European train filled with Europeans on it, and somebody came on board the train. A Muslim came on board the train, and he had a gun and a couple of other guns, and he started shooting up the train. And what the Europeans did, mostly French people, what they did was they got on their phones and called their wives or loved ones to say goodbye because we're all going to die here because this guy's got a gun and there's nothing we can do. Well, this guy starts shooting up this train. He doesn't get very far because 3 guys on the train get up and rush the guy with the gun, take it from him, and either kill him or incapacitate him, right? And the 3 guys who were on that train who did that, full train full of people. The 3 people that moved were 3 Americans. I don't know if they were the only Americans on the train, but there were only Americans that made the move. Although I seem to remember maybe a Canadian had something to do with it. But I'm virtually positive it was just these 3 Americans, right? 1 or 2 of them were ex-military. But what they all were they were all humans that had grown up in a society where initiative is valued, where competition is valued, where confidence, where mostly it's initiative, right? It's the ability to say, something's happening. I have to act rather than sit here, watch the house burn down. I got to go in there and save the people. 517 to Paris, it's called. Yeah, great. So it actually happens. It happens all the time. And if you think about it from an evolutionary point of view, from a genetic point of view, it makes perfect sense, right? There is, in fact, I have a friend who knows enough about biology that she was able to tell me which gene and which allele it is located on, but there is, in fact, a gene that codes for audacity, risk-taking, right? And Americans have this in a large degree. Why? Is it because we were just born cool? No. It's because America is settled by people who were unwilling to stay back where the famine was or where the czar was or wherever what it was. Everything uniformly sucks over there. A small but significant number of people had enough initiative to say, I'm out of here. I'm going to go across the world. I'm going to say goodbye to my village and my family. I'll never see them again. And I'm going to go to a country I've never seen before because I believe that things will be better over there. That is an enormous risk, right? It's an enormous risk. So Zengari says, Bill, eugenics is this isn't eugenics. It's nothing about eugenics. This is just plain common sense. This isn't eugenics. Eugenics is the manipulation of people for an outcome. This is just real. This is real. And it doesn't apply to white people. It applies to everybody. It applies to anybody who comes to this country, no matter what their color or race or whatever it is. If you've got the guts to get up and leave and come to this place, then that's because you've got that gene expressing itself that way. It's not eugenics. It's just behavior, right? So there it is. So there you go. Okay. Have a good time, Dave. In any event, that's the theory, and I think there's a lot of evidence to that theory. I really do. So that is an explanation, a biological explanation for why we see what's happening. People are getting to be less and less competitive. They're getting to be less and less masculine. Testosterone levels are falling. All of the qualities that used to be prized, like ambition, aggression, channeled aggression, competitiveness, winning, these things are all anathema now. And it wouldn't be happening if the biology wasn't changing. So there it is. All right. Bart Hennon says, devil's advocate question. With the expected red wave becoming barely a trickle, I have to ask, are we the ones in the bubble or the echo chamber? Now you're on a really interesting topic here. I don't mean that are we wrong? No, not at all. Our conservative principles, our ideas, and ideals remain intact, but are we in a bubble with regard to how to win elections? For weeks, I listened to Ben Shapiro and others say that people would not fall for the Democratic rhetoric and that the Dems were in for a disaster this election midterm. I said it too. And that the abortion issue would be minor compared to the economy issue and inflation. Just the opposite for nearly every, or very nearly so, of what actually came to be. Turns out people didn't care that much about the economy. It was going to the toilet. They did care about the repeal of Roe v. Wade and on down the line. And this surprised no one except conservatives. So are we the ones in the bubble echo chamber? Now we get to, yes, Ryan, you're absolutely correct. Ryan's, I'll get right back to you, Bart. Ryan said, does this explain why Hispanic migrants, meaning Latinos, I think Latinos hate that word, Hispanic, are going to skew Republicans as they realize what the parties stand for? Yeah, the people that come to America, especially the ones that do the hard work of coming to America legally, are selecting themselves for risk. It's just that simple. So I want to get to this question because this is the question. This is the question. Okay. So, are we in a bubble? Apparently we are. Apparently we are. We look at the rallies, and we see this unbelievable, two rallies in the same state at the same time. Donald Trump's in a stadium and he brings 45, 50,000 people. Joe Biden's in a high school gym with maybe 100 people there. And we look at that and we say, what else do you need to know, right? I mean, this is obvious. To me, it's just first-class evidence. It's evidence of your own eyes, of visual evidence, right? But that's not how it panned out. And then you start getting to the core of the problem. And this is what I think the problem is. Every now and then, just randomly, through making various sounds and noises, I will occasionally say something that I think is actually interesting and worth remembering. And when we were talking about this on the Daily Wire the other night, it suddenly hit me very clearly. I said, there are millions and millions, probably tens of millions of people who voted for Joe Biden because they love Bobby Kennedy so much. The second I had that thought and got out of my face, I said, there's something really there. Why do Democrats vote for a candidate with obvious brain damage? Because they love Bobby Kennedy. Why do they vote for a dead person in Pennsylvania? Because they love Bobby Kennedy or Obama or whatever. because the Democrats have a unified message. If I say to you woke politics, you don't have to like it, but you know what it is, right? You know what it is. If I say woke, you know what it is. It's a brand. And the Democrats have had a brand for the longest time. And part of that brand was the anti-brand attack, is what you would expect, right? Pepsi attacks Coke, Coke's after Pepsi. So part of the Democratic brand is we're the idealists, we're the ones who want progress, we're the ones who want fairness, we're the ones who want equality, and the Republicans are the ones that are constantly getting in our way and trying to stop this move towards a better world. And that's the brand. And as a brand, it's extremely effective. Now, reality is eating away at that brand very, very hard. The reality of what these people have evolved into, the Democrats and the progressives, are they're cheapening their own brand, and they're doing it real fast, right? Real fast. The Democrats were always the party of the small guy, the working guy. Well, now they're the party that says you don't you complain about the high gas prices, just buy an electric car. It's only $100,000. You won't have to pay for gas. You will have to pay for more electricity, however. I saw, I think it was, believe it or not, there was Bobby Kennedy, the one who's currently in Congress, asking Pete Buttigieg, Mr. Transportation Secretary, does charging an electric car, does that use more electricity than a refrigerator? And he says, yes. He says, does it use twice as much as a refrigerator? He says, more than that. He says, 5 times as much? Buttigieg says it uses 20 times as much electricity as the running of the refrigerator. So they're destroying their own brand because they are becoming the party of millionaires and the elite and the lunatics. And working people are leaving the Democratic Party in droves. They're not coming to the Republican Party because they love Republicans. They just can't stand being with those weirdos and psychos anymore. Now that is a real, actual opportunity for us. But now we get to the main point, and that is, okay, so if I say woke, you know what that means. If I say Republican or conservative, what does that mean? What associations does that make for you? When I mentioned it on the show, Mike said, well, it's kind of different per candidate. I said, yes, it is. It is different per candidate. That's why we're in trouble. Because when the Republicans have no brand other than Republican, when people say I'm a Republican, well, what does that mean? If you were, look, the whole idea of a conservative is somebody who thinks that things have gotten as good as they can get in a certain area, and now they're getting worse. So we are trying to conserve this. We're trying to stop this from getting worse. If you think things are bad and getting better, you're liberal. If you think things are better and getting worse, then you become a conservative. So the essential action that a conservative takes is to say, no, right? That's basically what conservatives do. No, this is not good. This is not good. And that's what people's opinions are about it. And so you have this. You don't even have a brand. You've just got the absence of a brand. And this is a real problem because there is a brand, We all believe in the same things. It's just that they don't know how to tell it. Eric Blake's right on the money. He said Ronald Reagan knew how to tell stories. Yes, so let's look at Ronald Reagan. If you look at the election map for 1984, you will see that the entire country is red, except for Minnesota, which was Walter Mondale's state. And Mondale carried that by 5,000 votes. Reagan, I found this out just 2 days ago, Reagan did not campaign in Minnesota because he didn't want to take his home state away from Mondale. He knew that one was going to be big, right? But in 1980 and 1984 especially, that map is 100% red with the exception of Minnesota, which is 5,000 votes away from being red too. You run the table, right? You run the table. That's data. What was it about Reagan that worked? What was it about Reagan that was that successful? Because no one has ever been that successful, ever. No one has ever been that successful in history, ever. There's not a single electoral map that looks like 1984. So, what was it? What did he do? Well, 1984 was a blowout because of what he did starting in 1980. Same as DeSantis. DeSantis squeaked by in what would that be? 2018, and now he wins by 20 points. So both Reagan and DeSantis came in with a vision, and then they made promises, and then they squeaked over the line, and then they fulfilled those promises. And when they fulfilled their promises, all of a sudden people got to be absolutely enamored, right? Because things were bad. He says, give me a chance, I'll make it better. They give him a chance, barely, and he makes it much better. So when the next election comes around, it goes, the guy said he would do it, and he did it. My life is much better now. So what is it about Reagan that worked? Why? Why? DeSantis, same kind of thing. Why? So Reagan had a very simple vision, and this is the beauty of it. Reagan's vision was morning in America. That's exactly what let's make America great again is morning in America, right? It's like we've been beaten down, and now it's time to pick ourselves back up and make things good again, make them better again, right? So Reagan came in with morning in America, and he took a country that had been completely demoralized by the Vietnam War, by the Iran hostage crisis, by the Arab oil embargo, where Americans who had been on the top of the world 5-10 years earlier are now at the bottom of the world, and they don't like it. And Jimmy Carter was saying, get used to it, wear a sweater indoors and drive 55 miles an hour and get a small, ugly car. And he said, this is the new reality, get used to it. And Reagan said, I don't buy that. I don't buy the entire preposition. I just don't. I think this country is capable of much, much better than that. And so he said, that's what I'm running on. And people gave him a chance, and he delivered. But that's only half of the issue. He got the messaging right, and maybe it's thirds. He got the messaging right. It was a good message, and it was a clear message, a simple message. Morning in America. It's not the end of America. This isn't sunset for us. This isn't that us going off into the good night. No, it's always morning in America. We always have a chance to completely do things over again. So he's got a good message, simple, easy to understand. Everybody gets it. The second thing he did to get that 84 electoral board is he actually did make the changes. The military got rebuilt. The economy started humming. Taxes and regulations were rolled back. People started, and more than anything, people had hope again for the future. You don't invest in things if you don't have any hope for the future. You don't open a new factory if you're convinced that things are just going to continue to go darker and darker and darker. So Reagan came and he made it easier for people to invest and build things. So they did. And so everything got better. So that's the second of the three parts. But the most important of the three parts in terms of what we're looking at today is Reagan was a happy warrior. There are many people who just despised Reagan's politics, but it's virtually impossible to despise Reagan, personally. Reagan was always smiling, and Reagan was always, he wasn't gentle so much as he was just buffered, He didn't come out and call Jimmy Carter, a washed-up loser. When Jimmy Carter said, well, we're concerned about your age, Reagan said, I'm glad somebody brought up the age issue because, frankly, I've decided that no matter what happens, I'm going to run a clean campaign, and I am not going to, it was against Mondale, I guess, and I am not going to hold my opponent's youth and inexperience against him. Boom. That was the election, as if it was ever in any doubt, right? Mondale wants to make a deal. Reagan's too old. He's getting senile. Reagan doesn't say, screw you, Mondale, Mondale the meek. He says, I refuse to allow, myself to descend to the level where I'm going to use my opponent's youth and inexperience against him. That's just magnificent. That's just perfect. That is as perfect as DeSantis and Abbott sending illegal aliens to Vermont and to Martha's Vineyard, which is the most brilliant political thing I've seen since Reagan. But Reagan was never. Bart points out that Mondale cracked up. Everybody cracked up. People who hated Reagan cracked up because it was funny, because he was a funny guy. But there was something about Ronald Reagan that was kind of unique. But in any event, this is the secret sauce, right? Reagan was strong, but he wasn't mean. And Trump is strong. And here we are. Anybody can look. You go into battle with the army you got, and from the beginning, when Trump became the nominee, my attitude was the same as Lincoln's attitude, which is, I can't spare this man. He fights. When somebody said Grant's got a drinking problem, Lincoln said he may have a drinking problem, he may have a pervert problem, he may have a gambling problem, he may have all kinds of problems, maybe a raving psychotic, but I can't spare him because he fights, he wins. And so that was that. But the question is, certainly if Donald Trump, if somebody had taken away his Twitter, not completely taken it away from him, right? Not taking it away from him so that he doesn't communicate, just getting it out of his hands, right? Just out of his hands so that they could just sit on it for a little bit, maybe just soften it up a little bit. He would have been president and we'd be on his second term, and everything that he achieved, peace in the Middle East, no new wars, energy exporting country, lowest unemployment for Latinos, for blacks. What Trump did as president is unbelievable. It's unbelievable what he accomplished. He accomplished more than Reagan did. I really genuinely think he did, right? But the thing that got him there is the thing that also got him out of there. He is not his, well, like I said on the Daily Wire, the thing that people love about Trump is that no one can tell him what to do. And the thing that people hate about Trump is that no one can tell him what to do. And that's tragic. It's a tragic problem because there's so much that he does that are unforced errors. And when you look at what he accomplishes, what he actually did, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what Donald Trump accomplished as president of the United States, especially coming after 8 years of Obama. What he did is unbelievable, not the least of which was stopping Hillary Clinton. But if he's not president doing unbelievable things as president, if all of the positive things he was doing and did are now off the table because of 2020, and we all have our own opinion about that, then all you're left with at the moment are the disadvantages or the negatives. And that's a problem, right? That's a problem. Why he attacked DeSantis 2 or 3 days before the election is, I was just gobsmacked. I just couldn't get it. I didn't understand it, although I kind of did, right? So look, yeah. So with that said, right? With that said, DeSantis is strong and he's tough, but he's not reckless. He's not making unforced errors. When people in the press, great example, I watched it in real time. I just couldn't believe it. It was right after Ian struck, and somebody from CNN said, okay, Governor, I'd like to address Florida's slow response to the crisis. Do you think that? And before he finished the sentence, he said, whoa, 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 whoa. See, this is why nobody trusts you. This is why nobody trusts you. We didn't have a slow response to the crisis. We had an extremely capable and very, very fast response to the crisis. Storm changed position by a couple hundred miles in the last hour and a half before it came on board. But we built these bridges. He didn't let him get away with it. But he didn't also, at the same time, add a kick that wasn't necessary. Now, here's the problem. DeSantis is, in my opinion, well, I don't think it's breakthrough punditry for me to say he's the best governor I've ever seen in my life. And not only is he a great governor in terms of doing what governors are supposed to do, he's made Florida much more livable. It's an expanding economy. He didn't lock down the COVID thing. He had the lowest death rate in the nation. He took all of these risks. He went for freedom. He took away regulations. And when it turned out that people were indoctrinating our kids with their philosophy instead of teaching them math, then he said, okay, if you want to turn these schools into a political thing, then we'll play politics. No, there's the law. And Disney, if you're now going to be a mechanism for social change, than that sweet deal that you've had since 1973 or whatever, 1970, we're going to re-examine that. That's great governance. But on the campaign trail, he doesn't draw what Trump does, because Trump is a showman, right? So here we are. So what do we do about this? Well, the biggest problem is that we are looking at candidates and we're not looking at the brand. I just have to say it again. Right now, well, as far as electorally is concerned, at least 5 major national politicians are mentally incapable. It's probably more than that. But Barbara Feinstein is suffering from major dementia. Nancy Pelosi is the same. Fetterman has a stroke and he can't put sentences together. Biden it's not even, it was funny, then it was sad, then it was, I don't know what it is anymore. It is, right? It's just a national ongoing toothache. And the 5th one is Kamala Harris. Nothing ever happened to her. She was just born stupid. But you've got 5 people with this real inability to function on an adult level in major political positions, and they're all Democrats. Why? Because the Democrats don't elect a politician, they don't elect a candidate, they elect the idea. That's why they vote for dead people. That's why they vote for Fetterman, because it's not about Fetterman. It's about the message. It's about the brand. And we don't have a brand. And we need to get a brand, because our brand is awesome. We just don't know what it is. We can't describe it. What we are is we are the world's greatest soft drink in an unmarked bottle that's sitting on the back of the shelf. That's what we are. We got the best message. We got the best taste out there by a wide margin, and we don't even know enough about marketing to even get in the game. So the Republican Party and BillWhittle.com are pretty much one-on-one matchup here, right? The brand has to be something that is recognizable over all of the candidates. It has to be a vision. It has to be a vision. And the vision can't just be those people are idiots and we're not voting for them. It has to be something positive. That's what Reagan came with. He came with a positive message, and he came with a positive attitude, and he didn't give you anything to hate. Right? He made it really hard for you to hate him. Trump is making it really hard for you to like him. And that's the difference, right? That's the difference. So what do we do about this? Well, as I said on the show, when I was just chatting with Kelly, Kelly and I are just constantly having conversation about these kind of things. But when I was on the show, I said, essentially the answer is take Ron DeSantis, bronze him up, put a blonde wig on him, tie his tie a little long in the front, and get him up on stage. That's the solution, right? Wrap the competence in the charisma and not the other way around. So, yeah, I saw it, Marusha. Thanks. It's nice. So, when you say, how do you lose to Fetterman? Well, you elect a candidate, you nominate a candidate who's not capable of beating a guy with brain damage, because that candidate wasn't just a bad candidate, he was a bad candidate who didn't have a message. Ron DeSantis was a good candidate who didn't have a message. Bear with me. He had an example, but he didn't have a message. He didn't have a vision. He just had results. So all of this together tells me that if I'm looking to make that Republican brand, then I go with what's working. DeSantis squeaks over the line 4 years ago, wins by 20 points. That's in American electoral politics, it's unprecedented, right? So why did DeSantis have that much of a gain? And not only did DeSantis have a gain in Florida, why did he take the entire state with him? There is not a Democrat from Florida on the national level, not one, right? So it's not just DeSantis, it's the Republican ground game, and it's everything else that he accomplished in that. It's the entire structure, it's the procedure. We were talking about this on Scott's segment of Right Angles that we shot this morning, and Scott said it was a great example. He was talking about when when the Japanese were cleaning our clocks with cars and making better cars and electronics, we'd just gotten lazy and stupid and just assumed, of course, people are going to buy GM. What else are they going to buy? Some Japanese junk? So the Japanese take the advice of this American guy, was it William? There was an American visionary businessman who basically said quality is the only thing that you sell. Somebody will give me his last name in a minute. I should have known it. I've just forgotten it. And nobody in America listened to him, but the Japanese did. And so they changed their entire business culture and not made cars, made excellence. Demings, right, Demings. Okay? So this morning, Scott has the example. He says that one of the things that the Deming strategy was, the Deming strategy of selling excellence was, instead of the manager sitting up in his office, before you had a chance to even apply for a manager, they would say, see, we painted a circle down there on the shop floor. See it? Yeah. Well, you need to go stand in that circle and just watch and listen, and we'll come and get you. And they said they made this guy stand there for 8 hours. So what's this all about? Well, what they're saying is, we don't want you to come in here with opinions and theories that don't bear any relationship to the reality on the floor. We want to know what the reality is, and then we want to build our plan around it. We don't want to come in with a plan and see if it happens to match reality. And there's a couple of cases of this kind of thing being very clear. I've been listening to this guy, ex-combat veteran. He's doing a lot of briefs on the Ukraine war. And he told a story. He's a former combat veteran. That's probably why he's named his channel as ex-combat veteran. But he was telling the story of he was in Iraq, and he said they took some RPG fire, and they wrote up the after-action report. What got him commenting on it was the presence of all of these GoPro body cam, the kind of thing, was that now the intelligence guys can see what the soldiers saw. Because he said what happened to him and has happened throughout the history of working with intelligence in our Army and others. He said we would have an engagement. We would say the number of people that we were engaging approximately. We'd say that we took RPG fire, let's say. All right, write this up. Here's the grid coordinates. Here's the time and the date. Here's who was here. Here's this is what we saw. Send it up to intelligence. So then he said, this is the vet speaking. He said then he'd read the intelligence report based on the report that the actual soldiers who fought in it sent down, and they found out that the RPG fire had been changed to mortar fire. And he said the reason they changed it to mortar fire was their intelligence told them that the enemy doesn't have RPGs here. So those stupid grunts must have been taking mortar fire and didn't realize it was mortar fire because our report says there are no RPGs there. So it couldn't have been RPGs. Must have been mortars. And then this guy's saying, what do we have to do? I mean, there's an equivalent to this in aviation. In the golden age at Edwards Air Force Base, when we were going further, faster, and higher every single day. We were flying so many different types of experimental airplanes, and we were pushing them so far on the envelope, we were really flying airplanes to the limit of their construction. And what would happen is there'd be a new airplane design, and test pilot would go up, and test pilots don't just go up and just say, "Oh, let's see what she can do." No, it's extraordinarily boring work. It's like we're going to take it to 460 knots, and we're going to do some 30-degree turns, stable here. Okay, let's take it up to 470 knots, and we'll do the same thing. It's extremely meticulous. So this pilot came back with a report that said that we're starting to pick up aileron flutter at anything above 520 knots. And he comes back down and says that to the engineers, and the engineers say that's impossible. We've done the calculations 30 times. You won't pick up any flutter on those ailerons until you get up near 600 knots. He said, well, I saw it at 520 knots. It's impossible. And then finally, one of these test pilots came in and smashes his hand down on the table, and he says, damn it, the pilot is always right. And he's right about that, because the pilot is the one who is dealing with reality. He's not dealing with theory. So DeSantis is dealing with reality. So if I had to craft the Republican message, here's what it would be. The brand for Republicans will be this. There are two competing theories of what makes people happy. One of them is to let government do everything, and one of them is to let government do only the bare bones minimum. In California, they want to do everything. That's the Democratic Party's brand, is have the government do everything. Okay, well, they're locked their kids out, close down all these businesses, and they have a higher mortality rate than we do. On the other hand, we in Florida didn't lock down the schools, had the lowest mortality rate, have the lower taxes, we have lower regulation, our economy is booming, people are leaving there, coming to here. That's evidence. That's not theory. If people are going from one place to another, it's because this other place works better. That place works better is our stuff. They're going from Democratic cities to Republican cities, or Democratic states to Republican states, because we do a better job. Because the actual truth is, everybody's happier when government does less. That's our brand. Our brand is, we think you know how to run your life better than I do. Any questions? Right? Any questions? We believe that you know how to run your life better than a bureaucrat does. That's it. So, a lot of people are saying the stream is glitching. Must mean I'm saying something worthwhile. Hopefully the audio is okay. And we will upload it to YouTube, and it'll be there. Sorry about that. It's not me. Everything looks groovy on this end. 345 viewers there, and another 78. We're starting to grow this little puppy, actually. No, the YouTube stream is not over. It's still on. I'm still streaming. And apparently it's gone out. Hopefully it'll come back. There's nothing I can do about this, so I'm just going to keep going. We'll see. All right, here's Chris Taylor. Marisha, Cody Fett. Lynn. I keep thinking I'm going to get to Facebook, but by golly, I just run out of voice here. I'll try and get all of these done though. Okay, so okay, Chris Taylor. I have to put on the spectacles. Bill, several times you've expressed opinions that suggest if liberty-loving regions of the United States like Texas and Florida decided to leave the Union in the near future in order to go back to being limited government free market states, you would support their secession. I would. And likewise, if commie-infested statist parts of the country, like old California, Boston, D.C., sprawl, etc., wanted a national divorce from the anti-choice Hicks in Jesus land, you would not take up arms and murder them to keep the Union together. Correct. You also seem like the kind of person who takes your word very seriously and feels a strong obligation to keep any oath or pledge you make, even at great personal cost. Yes. So my question is, and this is in bold, so here it comes. Have you stopped pledging yet that the United States is one nation under God, indivisible? Have I stopped pledging that? No, I haven't. If not, can you honestly pledge that the United States of America is indivisible? I'll get to that. Not that such a thing is really possible to pledge for any polity in our fallen world. I'll get to that. By the way, you may be interested to notice that immigrants' oath of allegiance does not require pledging the nation to be indivisible, and Dean Alfang's An American Creed seems far superior to both, pledging neither impossible indivisibility nor servitude to the government when it decides it is nationally important. I dare you to read it on air without crying. Here it comes. I do not choose to be a common man. It is my right to be uncommon. I seek to develop whatever talents God gave me, not security. I do not wish to be a kept citizen, humbled and dulled by having the state look after me. I want to take the calculated risk, to dream and to build, to fail and succeed. I refuse to barter incentive for a dole. I prefer the challenges of life to a guaranteed existence, the thrill of fulfillment to the stale calm of utopia. I will not trade freedom for beneficence, nor my dignity for a handout. I will never cower before any earthly master, nor bend to any threat. It is my heritage to stand erect, proud, and unafraid, to think and act myself and enjoy the benefit of my creations, and to face the world boldly and say this with God's help I have done, and this is what it means to be an American. Yep. And that is K. That's the K. King James Bible for K philosophy. It's in a nutshell. Oh man, YouTube is down to 74 viewers now from 350. So it must have like died. I'll just have to post it. Anyway, So when you ask, why do I still say indivisible? The Pledge of Allegiance has always been a little sketchy for me. Some people have a like a philosophical disagreement with it. I don't. I think it's important, But there's something just kind of there's just something a little sketchy about it. I don't need to restart. I can't restart because I'm recording this thing, and there's 200 or 300 people watching, and when I post it, there'll be 3,000 or 4,000 people watching, so I can't restart it, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to. There's nothing I can do about the streaming service. We're doing fine on this end. Everything here is green going out, so I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but nevertheless, there you go. Anyway, so indivisible is a weird sort of term. Pledging to the flag is a little strange. You would really think that we should be pledging to the Constitution. But the overall idea is there because it is it's a ritual that generates indivisibility and unity when it's spoken in good faith by most everybody, especially when the teachers are behind it. When the teachers are doing nothing but criticizing it, then they are not only dividing the nation, but they're using the Pledge of Allegiance to divide the nation. Hey, first-time chat from C. King's text. The parental rights in education bills only protects until 4th grade, and the stream is completely dying on our ends. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it. It's not on my end. It's just I got nothing but green lights here, so I'm sorry. Anyway, the reason that I don't change the indivisible part is because all of us talk about separation and stuff is a political, physical, geographical, philosophical division. But America is an idea. America is an idea. So as long as the idea is there, then I'm with the idea. I think what they're basically saying is that what I'm basically saying is that we should be pledging to the idea. So I'm getting notes from everybody that the stream is essentially completely useless, including the audio. So I'm going to cut this one off here because everybody's getting frustrated, and I don't want that. It will go up on YouTube and should be 30 frames a second. Nothing changed on our end, so anyway, there it is. So, yeah, I saw that it only lasts till 4th grade about the Florida law. Well, there's time to make some new laws, but it's a start anyway. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to plug this thing up right now because there's no point in going on. Nobody can hear me live, so I might as well just wrap it up here, and that's what I think I'll do. The show's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who keep the lights on and have been really been doing it for 12 years now, something like that, and longer, and to whom we are very, very grateful. Sorry about the early close, but it is what it is. We will see you Monday for Stratosphere Studio, and we'll see you next Thursday right here at the Stratosphere Lounge.